everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Charlene, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Stolen Queen by Fiona Davis. But before I get into the review, there are a couple of things that I want to talk about. The first one is that, yes, I did take a little bit of a break from YouTube. It was not originally planned, but I had one day when I went to film, and my SD card for my camera was just missing. I searched high and low all over the house, could not find it. So I knew there wasn't going to be a video that week. And then the next day, my husband found it in one of the multitude of places that I looked at several times. So I don't know what happened. But I had been starting to feel like maybe I need to take a bit of a break just for myself. We were getting towards the end of our homeschool year. Things were wrapping up. There were a lot of things that I needed to take care of. And I was starting to think that maybe I needed to take a little bit of time off just to get caught up on those things. Then I could come back. But I hadn't settled on if I was going to do that and if I was, when. And so this kind of became more of a God-imposed break from YouTube. I decided not to push it on when I was going to film next, when I was going to come back. I didn't know if I would be gone a couple weeks, if I would be gone a month, but I did need a little bit of a break. In that time, we have finished up our homeschool year, so I have a few weeks off. We do not get as long of a summer break because I give us a longer break in December. We take off from the week before Thanksgiving in the US until after New Year's. So I get a longer break 2 different times a year, but I don't get the 3-month-long summer break that a lot of other people do. So now that we have some time off, I can get a little bit more done with this channel, so I'm putting it into the break, if you will. But during the time that I was not posting videos, I did also hit 1 year here on YouTube. And I did put out a community post about it, but unfortunately the video I plan to have out to mention that and to celebrate that was the one that I was supposed to film when the SD card went missing. So that video would have been filmed 2 or 3 days before my anniversary, and I didn't have any other time to be able to film that before it was supposed to come out. So that's why I did the community post. But if you missed it, I did make it to 1 year here on BookTube. I do want to personally, a little more face-to-face, actually thank all of you who have watched my videos, who have liked, commented, subscribed, all of that in the past year. I really, really appreciate every single one of you. So many people in this community have made me feel so welcome over the last year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what the next year brings. So with that being said, I am planning to take a bit of a step back from YouTube. My kids are getting a little bit older. There's more involved in their curriculum. And I'm one who likes to be very deeply involved. I like to plan things that go beyond the curriculum. And so me personally, I just know that I can't be as involved in their homeschool as I want to be and post every single week here on YouTube. So I'm not having it set in stone this way, but I'm going to try to stick to about every other week is when I will be posting videos. And mostly it's because of the time that's needed to plan the videos, to film them, to edit them, upload them, respond to comments, and to get the reading done that I need to do in order to have content to post and talk about. So with everything going on in our next homeschool year and anything else going on in my life, I'm just cutting back a little bit more to make sure that I have time to put out good quality content for you guys, and it's not just I'm filming a quick video so I have something to post. And I'm also, hopefully, not stressing myself out over all of the videos that I need to film and I need to edit and get out by a certain time if that's actually not feasible. So I hope you guys are okay with that. It is going to change some of the videos that I put out. I am going to stick with my quarterly wrap-ups, and probably what I'll do is more of a seasonal TBR with the quarterly wrap-ups rather than doing monthly TBRs. Just because if I'm only posting 2 or 3 videos a month, posting a wrap-up and a TBR every month takes up both of those videos. So in order to avoid that, we're going to stick with quarterly wrap-ups, quarterly TBRs, and then I can focus on the other videos that I'm really wanting to make and put out for you guys. But since I don't have anything talking about the books that I'm planning to read in the summer at this point, I am at least going to mention the book club book and the Jane Austen read-along books for June. So if you haven't seen those in community posts yet, or on Instagram or anywhere else where we're posting those things, you can still hear about it here. So the book club pick for the Distant Lands Book Club, which is my personal book club that was chosen for June, is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. I knew I wanted to do an Asian-inspired fantasy in June, but I couldn't decide which book I wanted to do, so I ended up leaving this one up to my co-host, and this is the book that she chose. I don't remember much about this because I had 3 different books that she could have picked from, and I'm not the best at remembering synopses. This is why I can very easily go into a book blind, because I'll read the synopsis and 2 minutes later I don't remember anything. I know it has something to do with the main character is searching for her mother or searching for something that had to do with her mother. I believe there's a romance in this one, but my understanding is it is a clean romance, and that's pretty much all I know, which is not a lot, but I will have a link to the Goodreads page for this book down in the description below, so if you want to go read more on what this book is about, feel free to do so. And as always, a link to the book club on Fable is down in the description as well. We have discussions there where Fable breaks it down chapter by chapter, and you can leave your thoughts and comments as you read through the book. You can read through the comments up through what you've read in the book without having to worry about spoilers and all of that. And my co-host for June is Maddie from This Bookish Cottage, and I am so excited to have her along for this. I didn't know if she would be up for it in June since she is doing Mysteries and Mayhem in May. And if you are following that Discord at all, there is so much going on. I do not know how she keeps up with it. But she was very happy to join me for June, and I am so excited to have her along and to hear her thoughts on this book. And then for the Celebrating Jane Austen read-along that I am hosting with Anne from In Search of Wonder throughout this entire year, reading books by Jane Austen and also by authors that inspired her, the book that we are reading for June is Mansfield Park, which is the 3rd book chronologically that she published. This is one book by Jane Austen that I have not read or seen a movie adaptation or anything like that in any shape or form. I have no idea what this story is about. I literally am going into this book blind. I think there's only... I think Lady Susan is the only other one that I know absolutely nothing about. And this is a little bit of a chunkier book, so this could get interesting. But we've read through Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice this year. I've really enjoyed both of them. So I'm really curious to see what this one is like, knowing absolutely nothing about it beforehand. Alright, I think that was all of the intro stuff that I needed to get out of the way before I got into the review. But you'll notice this in just a minute because my outfit will change. But I actually filmed this one a few weeks ago. I don't know exactly how long ago at this point. It's been a while. But originally I was going to talk about 2 different books. But once I started editing it, I realized I didn't actually have any thoughts on the 2nd book that could not just be included in a non-spoilery wrap-up. And I realized that it didn't make sense to talk about that book when I didn't have any spoilery thoughts on it, but The Stolen Queen I very much did. So we're going to jump to Past Me, who will talk about The Stolen Queen. I had to re-record the intro anyway because I was talking about 2 books and then had to cut it down to 1 book. And I will be back in the outro to wrap up this video because, again, I'm only talking about 1 book this time. So let's jump ahead to the review. I will have timestamps down below for everything in this video. So if there's any particular part of this review that you aren't interested in, or if you're wanting to avoid spoilers, you can avoid all of that. But The Stolen Queen by Fiona Davis is about a woman named Charlotte who went on an archaeological dig in Egypt back in the 1930s, and then we follow her in the 1970s when she is working at the Museum of Natural History in New York City. And the museum is getting ready for the Tut exhibit to come in, but then there is an item that comes in from Egypt that she believes to be stolen. So she starts trying to investigate who it is that loaned this item to the museum because they're wanting to remain anonymous. But if it's stolen, she wants to know who it is so it can get back into the rightful hands. But then we're also following Annie, who has a very strained relationship with her mother, and she ends up getting hired as the assistant to a fashion icon named Diana Vreeland, who is organizing the Met Gala. But then some things happen at the Met Gala that end up causing problems for both Annie and Charlotte, And so it puts the two of them together to try to figure some things out. Now I will be going into more detail. I will talk about the book kind of in order, so I will have things up here on the screen to let you know where I'm talking about spoilers in the book. So if there's certain parts of the book you don't want to be spoiled for, you can avoid that. And then I will also give my final overall spoilery-free thoughts at the very end. So again, timestamps down below if there's anything that you want to skip over. So this book primarily follows Charlotte. So we're going to start with her storyline. There's really three storylines in here. We have Charlotte in the 1930s, Charlotte in the 1970s, and then Annie in the 1970s. So starting with Charlotte in the 1930s. So in 1936 and 37, Charlotte is on an archaeological dig in Egypt as part of her university studies, if I remember correctly. And she ends up discovering a tomb. And while on this dig, she is mostly taking notes of everything that has been discovered and cataloging it and all of that. But then at one point, she ends up uncovering a tomb. And they don't know for sure which pharaoh the tomb is for. She has her guesses, but they don't know for sure, so they can't state that it is that pharaoh's tomb. But we are dealing with archaeologists in the 1930s, and so even though she discovered it, the credit is only partially going to be given to her. It is also partially going to be given to another man named Leon, and it also sounds like he's probably going to get a little bit more of the credit than she is. At the same time that she is on this dig, she meets a man named Henry, and they start a romantic relationship. And that's all I'm going to say for the less spoilery part. But we do know from the 1970s perspective that something happened while she was on this dig that leads her to believe that a curse related to the pharaoh's tomb that she uncovered has been following her pretty much most of her life. We are told in the 1970s that she has tried to get back to Egypt a couple of times but has been unsuccessful and believes that it is because of this curse. So very much in this part of the story, we have a feminist perspective on women should be allowed at archaeological dig sites and they should be getting the credit for their work, which yes, 100%. If you want to go on an archaeological dig and you're qualified, you should be able to do that. If you discover something, you should get the credit for it. But obviously this book is pointing to there was a time when women were not really looked upon positively for being at dig sites, and they weren't taken seriously, and they weren't always given credit for their work. There is also a point while on this dig that she is talking to Henry, and she's talking about how women were able to be more expressive sexually, and having relationships out of wedlock was not frowned upon, and all these kinds of things. And she views them in a very positive light. Yes, it can sound very enticing, but I understand that there are a lot of pitfalls with that. There is a reason why promiscuity should not be super prevalent. But the viewpoint that she has is it was better for women when they were able to be more loose. I don't agree with that viewpoint, but that is the viewpoint that she holds in this story. It does also lead her to be in a relationship with Henry outside of marriage. She does end up getting pregnant, and then they do eventually get married. But while, yes, I do believe that they actually cared for each other, and there's at least a reasonable chance that they would have gotten married even if she hadn't gotten pregnant, there is still the feeling at that point in the story that the only reason they're going through with this right now is because she's expecting, and they know that it would be better if they were married before the child is born. So now getting a lot more into the spoilery section for this, after the child is born, we do start seeing some problems in the marriage. Henry does start spending a lot more time away from her and their daughter, and she doesn't really know why. Now, I will say the reason he actually stayed away made me feel a lot better, because I was starting to worry that it was going to be a case of because he and Leon were spending a lot more time together, and that seemed to be the reason that he wasn't around his family. And I was really concerned at one point that it was going to be because he was having a relationship with Leon. Thankfully, that was not the case. They were involved in something illegal, so that's still not good. But I was thankful that that did not end up being why he was staying away. But then this perspective pretty much wraps up after they leave Egypt. And there's a storm that blows in. Pretty much everyone, as far as we know, or a lot of people were washed overboard in the Nile. Charlotte manages to survive, but as far as she knows, Henry, Leon, and her daughter did not survive. And that's kind of where it closes off. We do see her with her family when she first gets home, and they kind of want to just sweep the whole thing away, pretend it didn't happen. But that's really about where her perspective in the 1930s wraps up. And that leads us into the 1970s and where she is at that point in the story. So in the 1970s, she has been working at the Museum of Natural History for quite a while, and she specifically works in the Egyptian wing. And her main area of interest is on the pharaoh named Hathorkari. And I'm guessing I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know for sure. However, I will make a note if you, like me, are going, oh, I haven't heard of Hathorkari. That sounds interesting. A new pharaoh I haven't heard of. Let me read the book and learn more. Hathorkari is not real. Hathorkari is based on Queen Hatshepsut. If you haven't heard of her, yes, you can read this book and get some information there. But as far as Hathorkari's reign, the fact that she is viewed as a usurper and different things like that is all based on Queen Hatshepsut and her predecessor Tutmos. Oh, why can't I remember his name? I think it's Tutmos. Tutmos II and her successor Tutmos III. If I have those names wrong, I will correct them somewhere on the screen. Which actually lends this book to being very well timed, because a tomb for, I'm pretty sure Tutmos II, it's either the second or the third, was actually recently discovered this year. And Hathorkari's predecessor and successor are, I think, Saukmut, the second and third, who are based on Tutmos, the second and third. So this is actually very well timed without her realizing it. But yes, if you're kind of interested in the viewpoint on Hatshepsut when she was pharaoh by archaeologists for a long time, this would be interesting to read to kind of learn about those political dynamics and what we believed about them and what we more so believe about them now. But Hathorkari herself was not actually an Egyptian pharaoh. Neither was Saukmut the second or third. But it is in the Egyptian wing that she has been working, and specifically with the Hathorkari exhibits. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. One of the things that she has been really working on is her research on Hathorkari and trying to prove that Hathorkari was not a usurper, was not so disliked or even hated by her successor that he removed her image from the temples, the palace, whatever it was, right after he succeeded her to the throne. That it was several years, possibly as much as 20 years after her reign, that her images were removed or altered. I believe they were altered to resemble his son, if I remember correctly, either himself or his son. But that it was done sometime later and for a different reason than just he did not like Hathorkari. That is her main research that she has been working on for several years. But the curator at the museum is considered an expert on Hathorkari and has already published other journal articles and things like that that basically state, yes, she was a usurper. And so Charlotte is having to work against that, because if her work turns out to be true, then it undermines his work and means that his work was incorrect. But they're getting ready for this King Tut exhibit, and then a necklace that Charlotte knows or is very positive was originally Hathorkari's, that was the one that was found in the tomb she discovered in Egypt, turns up at the museum from an anonymous donor, and based on what she knows of the necklace, she's pretty sure that it was stolen. But when she starts trying to do some investigating and hire someone to investigate for her into who this donor is, all of a sudden she starts receiving threats. Whoever this necklace is from, they do not want her investigating their identity. On top of all of this that is going on, Charlotte has been in a relationship with a man I believed named Gary. I forgot to look up the name before I recorded. And they've been in a relationship for a while. They are not married, but they are living together. But recently, his daughter, who I think she's 18 or 19, and she's out of high school. I don't know if she's in college or she's just college age. But her parents have been divorced for quite a while. And she's been living with her mom, but now she moves to New York to live with her dad. And she does not seem to like Charlotte. And the biggest issue that I have is we never get a definite reason for why she doesn't like Charlotte. So I don't know if it's because her dad's in a relationship and it wouldn't matter who he's in a relationship with. She wouldn't have liked Charlotte, or she wouldn't have liked whoever it was. Or if there's some other reason that she doesn't like Charlotte. We don't actually get an explanation on that. And that's one thing that it's like, even if it didn't get resolved, like they didn't work things out, I still would have liked to have had a reason for why she was so distant with Charlotte. And if nothing else, maybe Charlotte have a conversation with her that even if your dad and I don't stay together, there's probably going to be someone that he's going to be in a relationship with. And he's going to want to marry that person. And you need to find a way to be okay with that. I mean, obviously, if there's a problem with the individual person, that's one thing. Or if her problem is you're living with this woman, but you're not married to her, that would also be one thing. But we get no explanation as to what it is about Charlotte, or if it's just the fact that her dad has a girlfriend at all, that is the problem. The other big thing with Charlotte is that there end up being about 5 or 6 different mysteries in this book that come up. And all of them are related to Charlotte, and all of them get solved very close together. I kind of talked about this a little bit in my quarterly wrap-up, but I'll go into a little bit more detail on what those specific mysteries are and how close together they were actually resolved. So the first one I've already kind of mentioned, and that is, whose tomb is it in Egypt that Charlotte discovers? The second one is the research that she's working on. Was Hathorkere a usurper, or was she not? And was her image removed very soon after her successor came to the throne because he disliked her, or was it removed later for a different reason? Those are the first two that we come across. But then as we go through the story, some others come up. One is what happened to Henry. Also what happened to their daughter. And you can consider that 1 or 2 mysteries because it is the same mystery. We want to know what happened to them, but they're resolved at different times. Not very far apart, but they are resolved at different times. Then at the Met Gala, or during the Met Gala, Charlotte's research is stolen, and so is the necklace that is believed to be Hathorkere's. Or not the necklace, sorry. The Cerulean Queen, which is the partial image of Hathorkere's face that has been on display. That is stolen. So those are the main 5, 6 mysteries, depending on if you want to count Henry and their daughter as 2 separate mysteries. But all of this gets resolved very close together. Because after all of these things happen at the Met Gala, Charlotte goes to Egypt and soon learns that Leon survived the storm on the Nile. Through him gets not much information. He's not really willing to reveal anything, but he accidentally says something that clues her in that Henry survived. Then, while she is there, she revisits the tomb that she discovered when she was in Egypt, and the canopic box in which the pharaoh's organs were kept when they were entombed is discovered in the tomb. And then she has it sent to, I think it's a hospital in Cairo, where they do a CAT scan on it to discover that this is Hathorkere's canopic box. And they do, I think they also do a CAT scan on Hathorkere, on one of the mummies, to determine that this is Hathorkere. So it is discovered that the tomb is hers, and they know which mummy is her. Then she goes back to New York, and there she discovers who it is who stole her research and who stole the Cerulean Queen. And then Henry shows up because he has gotten wind that Charlotte did survive, that she's in New York. So he goes to the museum to try to find her. She meets up with Henry, and then during a conversation she has with him, someone else puts the pieces together that she knows who their daughter is and that their daughter is alive. I think I covered all the mysteries. So yeah, so all of those pretty much get wrapped up within a few days of each other. Also, she then goes back to Egypt and they catch the person who stole the Cerulean Queen and they get the Cerulean Queen back. So all of this happens within probably about a week, maybe 2 weeks at the most, depending on how long it took for them to get back to Egypt and get the Cerulean Queen. So it takes a little bit longer for her to finally meet her daughter, but knowing who her daughter is discovered within that same time period. So it's a lot of mysteries that just got wrapped up very close together. And it's just one of those things where I wished it could have been spaced out better. I did find it all interesting, but I would have preferred it to be spaced out more. The other thing is the CAT scan. Like I said, there was a CAT scan done on the canopic box and on the mummy from the tomb. Now, I tried to do some research, but it is hard to get definite research. But Queen Hatshepsut, I don't remember when her tomb was discovered. I'm pretty sure it was before Hathor in this book. But her CAT scan was not done until the 1990s. So I'm trying to figure out if Queen Hatshepsut was found either earlier than Hathor or even if she was discovered later than Hathor, when CAT scans would have been around longer, and her CAT scan wasn't done until the 90s, why would it come to someone's mind to do a CAT scan on Hathor so soon after the canopic box is discovered? That is definitely one part of the book where I felt like you could have had an epilogue 10, 20 years in the future and then have the CAT scan done. And maybe Charlotte is gone by that point, so she doesn't get to find out the answer, but maybe her daughter does. Something like that. I'm not sure how realistic it is to believe that CAT scans in the 1970s, the late 1970s, because it was invented in the early 1970s, that they would be able, within a few hours, to do the CAT scan and know this is Hathor at that point in time. It's possible that it is realistic, but for me, it doesn't feel realistic. So now we're going to get to the last character in the book, and that is Annie. And Annie has been living with her mother, just her mother, since her father died when she was, I believe, 10 years old. Her mother is a model, but she's getting older. I believe at the time in which the book takes place, Annie is 19 and her mother is 39. So her mother's getting a little bit older. It's getting harder for her to find modeling jobs, but that's all she knows and that's all she wants to do. So she is determined to find some jobs. But unfortunately, she's not finding enough jobs, and so Annie is having to work to bring in more money into their household so that they can pay their rent. And one of the jobs that she has is working for their landlord, doing some cleaning around her house and things like that for a reduced rental price. And honestly, when I started this book, Mrs. H is what we know her landlady as. When the story started, I was not really keen on Mrs. H because I'm like, yeah, real easy to take advantage of someone who's really needing money and have them do the work around the house so you don't have to do it yourself and say, well, I'll reduce your rent. But how much is she really reducing it was kind of my question. But as the story went on, I liked Mrs. H more and more. Unfortunately, also as the story went on, we saw her less and less. Honestly, she was probably one of my favorite characters, and I wish she would have shown up more often. Because Mrs. H really had a good heart. She knew the dynamics of this household, and she felt bad for Annie. She knew Annie deserved better. And so not only was she reducing the rate of their rent in exchange for Annie doing work around her apartment or her townhouse or whatever it was that she lived in, she also was setting money aside for Annie that should Annie need it for any reason in the future, she could take all of that money. Like if she needed to move out, get her own place, she could take that money and get away. So I really appreciated Mrs. H so much. And she also made it possible for Annie to meet Diana Vreeland, who is the fashion icon organizing the Met Gala. And through meeting her, ends up becoming her assistant. So it gets her into a better job, and one that she's probably a bit more suited for anyway. So I really appreciated Mrs. H. She was one of the best characters in this book, if not the best character in this book. But then the Met Gala happens, and Annie was bringing in butterflies, misunderstanding Deanna Vreeland's metaphorical idea for being a literal one. Unfortunately, someone called the place where she was getting the butterflies from and had them swapped for moths, which of course the moths go everywhere. They cling to clothes, they cling to the mannequins' clothes, they go after people. Everybody is freaking out. It causes this big diversion that enables Charlotte's research and the Cerulean Queen to be stolen. And of course, Annie is the top suspect because she's the one that released the moths. We know that she didn't have anything to do with it, but that's not what the police think. And it makes sense. So the biggest question, the biggest mystery we have with Annie is who swapped the butterflies for the moths? Unfortunately, that's an answer we get at the same time that we find out who stole Charlotte's research and who stole the Cerulean Queen. So it gets wrapped up all at the same time. But it is the only mystery attached to Annie, and we know it's related to these other mysteries because it was clearly done as a diversion. One of the biggest things I really wanted to know in here, first of all, I liked Annie more than I liked Charlotte. I wanted to know more of Annie's story than Charlotte's. I guess I shouldn't say I didn't like Charlotte's story. It was just I got plenty of Charlotte's story. And I really enjoyed the part in Egypt. I did enjoy some of the things in the 1970s as well, but I really wanted more about Annie. And things that I wanted more answers on, we really didn't get. Or we did, but we didn't get as much detail on. I wanted to know more about her mother, her and her mother's relationship. I wanted to see exactly how all of that was going to work out. But all we really get by the end of the book is that Annie is working with Deanna Vreeland again, and she's traveling with her. So there is just no relationship between her and her mother. I wanted to know more about her dad. We know her dad died when she was 10, but that's really all we know. We don't know much about him. So I was curious to learn more about him as well. Also, and this may have been the reason she didn't do it, because Annie was a POV character, I was assuming that somehow there was going to be a connection between her and Charlotte. I didn't know if it was going to turn out that Annie's mother was Charlotte's daughter, or what the connection was going to be, but I expected there to be some kind of connection. And there really didn't end up being one. The only connection we have is when Charlotte decides to go to Egypt, Annie decides to go with her. And even though Charlotte tells her, no, you stay here, Annie goes anyway. And the two of them really don't have any kind of relationship, business relationship, friendship, anything like that, prior to her going to Egypt with her. It's just the fact that the moths caused the diversion that enabled the stuff to be stolen. That's the only connection that they have. And it felt like while Annie was in Egypt, anything she did, like finding the canopic box and stuff like that, was only put in there to give her a purpose for being in Egypt. The only thing that probably would have been difficult to have someone else somehow discover is the letter from Leon to whoever he was communicating with, that Annie kind of snuck in to read while Charlotte was talking to, I think the woman was Leon's landlady. Other than that, pretty much anything Annie discovered, I feel like could have been discovered by someone else, even by Charlotte herself, if she had just gone by herself. So, as much as I liked Annie, and I wanted to learn more about her story, because pretty much all of these mysteries, except for the moth fiasco, were attached to Charlotte, in the end, it just felt like Annie's story didn't need to be there. I'm honestly not entirely certain why her POV was included. I think the book could have just been Charlotte's perspective and still been just as good. Like, you could have Charlotte meeting Annie. You know, she's gotten hired as Deanna's new assistant, and so, Charlotte comes into contact with her a couple of times, so we know who she is. So when this moth fiasco happens, we know who the person is, and we understand why the police are suspicious of her, but I don't think she needed to be a POV character. That's my personal opinion, which is unfortunate to say because Mrs. H, her relationship with her mother, I wanted to know more about all of that, and I was much more interested in that than Charlotte's story in the 1970s. But in the end, I really don't think Annie was a necessary character. All right, so those are all of my spoilery thoughts on the book. To kind of wrap this up, non-spoilery, there were things I enjoyed about this book. I did like the different mysteries. I just thought they were wrapped up too quickly, too close together. There were a variety of characters that I liked, but I feel like we didn't get as much information on the different characters and their relationships with each other as I would have preferred. I wanted more on Charlotte's relationships, on Annie's relationships, and unfortunately in the end, I wish there had been more in the book that made Annie a bigger part of the story, because with what we got in this book, I don't feel like Annie was a necessary character, especially as a POV character. She could have been there as a secondary side character, but not as a POV character. Hopefully I didn't forget to mention anything, but those were all of my thoughts on The Stolen Queen as I could think of them. The book started out good, started out strong, but ultimately I wanted more from the characters than I got on their backgrounds, their relationships, and I also thought that the mysteries just wrapped up way too fast for how many there were. So that covers all of my thoughts. If you guys have read The Stolen Queen, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments below. I'd love to keep chatting about it. If there's anything I didn't cover that you're curious about, you can ask that down in the comments as well, and I will do my best to answer them. And thank you all again for being here over the last year. Whether you've been here from the beginning or you just recently discovered my channel, I do thank each and every one of you for being here and for watching my videos. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May He make His face shine upon you and give you peace. I'll see you later.